75 team having its 50th reunion this weekend. Squad went 26-5 and was national runner-up. Of course, a huge highlight of the season was the win over undefeated Indiana in the Mid-East Regional Final. Got a couple of representatives from the team to represent the guys to talk about them today. One, Kevin Greavy had a event come up. He is not going to be able to be here today, so we've got Mike Flynn on your far left, and Jimmy Dan Connor. Jimmy Dan was All-SEC player that year, averaged 12 points a game, led the team in assists, and Mike averaged 9 points a game, and even more than that, he was the leading scorer, 22 points in the win over Indiana against the undefeated Hoosiers to lead the Wildcats to advancing to the Final Four. So at this point, we will turn it open for questions. Got folks on each side, so if you've got a question, raise your hand so we can get the audio to the folks in the back.
Trace with Cats Coverage. So when you think about your time at Kentucky, what's the number one go-to memory or thought that you start to tell people that you usually lead off with, like a memory from your day of playing?
Go ahead. Well, I think the Indiana game, I grew up in Kentucky. I'm from Kentucky. Mike, unfortunately, is from Indiana, but we accept him after having to put up with him all those years. But that game and I mean, just playing at Kentucky, it's kind of hard if you grew up. You got a two-name first name. You're pretty good at basketball. That's what you need to do.
Yeah, my time at Kentucky had a lot of great memories, but of course it was the IU game up in Dayton. I don't know if you remember, but they kicked our butt pretty good up in Bloomington back in November, and at the end of the game, all the subs were in there, and Bobby Knight's still up screaming at the referee about a missed call with a minute to go. And Joe B said, "Hey, Bobby, you're up 20. The game's over. What are you doing?" And that's when Bobby came over to Joe and smacked him upside the head. And I'm sitting there with Greavy and going, "Did you see what he just did?" Hey, so
we want to hear the unadulterated what really happened that day.
Yeah. So we remembered that, and we wanted to teach Bobby Knight a lesson. I mean, I liked all the IU players.
I'm going to interrupt you, but I was sitting. So Joe and Bobby were buddies, fishing buddies, hunting buddies, and at that particular time. And so Joe politely said, "Come on, Bobby, you're up 25, and give us a break." Bobby's response started with an F and ended with a U. And Joe took a little offense to that. So I actually could hear the conversation, and so Joe pointed, he made a mistake, he turned his head and he pointed over to the exit sign. He said, "I would like to take you over that exit sign and kick your," and with that, Bobby, I don't know how you heard the slap, but when you come from here this way, you get a lot of leverage and you get a lot of power. And Joe's glasses went flying off. And Lynn Nance, ex-FBI guy, jumps up and he's in a karate pose. And Leonard Hamilton is draped over Lynn Nance trying to keep him from hitting Bobby Knight. And the game never stopped. So the game was going on. And so that is a witnessed, I heard every word. That's exactly what happened. So you were asking for a memory. That was a good, or an interesting memory.
And one thing Coach Hall did right before the game, and he never did this before, he took me and Jimmy Dan aside. He said, "Hey, look for your shots early." He was giving us the green light to shoot. We just go, "Okay, we will." Because IU was so good in their half-court defense when they got set up. So he wanted us to get out quick and transition and look for our shots. And fortunately, it paid off. Joe knew what he was doing.
Yeah, in 4 years, he had never told us to do that before.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, actually, I was going to ask about that green light, but I'll move on. As competitors, when you look back on 75, do you remember IU or do you remember UCLA because of the loss? And dang you, John Wooden, why didn't you retire a year later?
I try to remember IU. that was my greatest time in basketball, greatest game, just beating IU. But I'm convinced UCLA beat us because Johnny Wooden announces his retirement the day before the game. He's not going to lose his last game. He's already won 9. And they went out and played a great game, and we played a good game, but they were just a little better that day. But if he wouldn't announce his retirement, I think we would have beat him. But I don't know if y'all remember this. Louisville had UCLA beat in the semifinal game. And Louisville choked, they spit it up. And we should have been playing Louisville for the national championship. But that's how it worked out.
I've had the great honor to be around Coach Wooden and get to know him numerous times, and what a great gentleman he was. And he was the ultimate coach move, if you think about it. And it was time for him to move on, and his timing was pretty good. And I tell people, and I believe this, if we had played UCLA 10 times on a neutral court, I think we would have beaten them at least 7, maybe 8 times. I think we were a better team. Now, he argues with me. He said they were quicker than we were, which is probably true.
They were quicker, more athletic, but we were physically stronger. More, yeah. But, yeah.
John?
As Mike said, you got your butts kicked by Indiana that first time. If I remember correctly, you played North Carolina in the next game. I think you guys were behind at the half or behind early in the game. And then, Joe, did he bench you guys? And then you guys asked to come back in. Can you just talk about that memory? And did that turn the season around?
I saw a little note on it. I didn't realize we were down by 15, but yes, indeed, we were on the bench. And Coach Hall was the type that you diplomatically ask questions, and so it was a little bit different. I went to him, and one or two things were going to happen. I said, "What in the hell are you doing? Put us back in." It was I was either going to be hit and thrown out, and he paused and thought about it and put it back in, and so we turned that around, and that was 2 days after the IU game, which they had totally humiliated us. And so, yeah, I can remember that game because I was hot.
Yeah, Jimmy
It
Day
was
had
the only time Greavy couldn't shoot because I was shooting.
Yeah, Jimmy Day had a big game. I remember that. Yeah, he carried us that game.
Guys, I got 2 quick things on the other side. So I've heard the Joby story before with Bobby Knight. I won't give up the source, but one of your teammates. Apparently, Joby, you left out some choice words he said tonight about going outside. Am I correct?
Yeah.
The second thing is, seriously, you talk about the obvious, the joy of you guys seeing each other, because days are dwindling for us all, and the beauty and the friendship and the brotherhood that you guys have till, I don't mean to be corny, till death do you part, because of the closeness of you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it was just great, spending 4 years with these guys, Jimmy Dan and Kevin, and Jerry and Bob and all of them. 4 years of my life, some of the greatest 4 years I ever spent. So, yeah, and it's great seeing these guys. And it's unfortunate some of them have passed away, and a couple of them couldn't make it here this weekend. But, yeah, it's always great to get back and see all the guys.
We've actually done pretty well to review before Coach Calipari, our freshman class. We had 7 freshman class. We had Mr. Kentucky, Mr. Indiana, Mr. Ohio, and Mr. Illinois. And then our also-rans were 2 first-team All-State from Indiana and 1 first-team All-State from Kentucky. So arguably one of the better recruiting classes in a long time. And what nice for me is we have managed to keep together. We try to get that original group, I don't know, every 2 years for sure, but every 2 years we come to a game and get together, and we've managed to stay. And if you played under Adolph and Joe, you did some of those practices, that's kind of like being bonded by warfare. I guess is the best way to do it.
Yeah, I'll never forget our freshman year. We actually had to practice against the varsity And then we got to take a little break after that, and then we had to go back there and practice again as a freshman. That was a tough year, that freshman year.
We would practice an hour and a half, and with the seniors, and it was the last year the freshmen were not eligible to play on the varsity. And I had known Adolph, and there was a guy named Larry Stamper, typical Eastern Kentucky from the hills, rough as a cob. And Adolph would often say to Larry, it's a good thing that Connor can't play because you'd be on the bench, which is not, if you happen to be me, that means you better be covering up because Larry was coming at you. But that was Adolph and how he incentivized you, and so you either became tougher or you did something else.
Yeah, the landscape of college basketball has really changed over the last 50 years. I mean, you guys came in, you spent 4 years together, started as the Super Kittens. Now you see players who come in a year at a program, 2 at the most, and then they're gone. It's probably impossible for them to even get together for a reunion. In hindsight, how important is it to have that bonding experience over 4 years? And what are your thoughts on NIL, transfer portal in general?
Well, I think it's very special to go to school for 4 years and get your education, get your degree, and then go to the pros or NBA, wherever. But the game has changed tremendously with guys going one and done. But I can understand it. If they're good enough to get to the NBA and start making big money, then they should be allowed to do that. And with all the money being generated in college athletics today, I think it's a good thing for NIL. And now some of these programs are going to have $20 million to distribute to the football and basketball players, which is a good thing. And then the three-pointer, that's really changed the game. Me and Jimmy Dan Bolt could shoot the three back in the day, but they didn't have it, and now they do, so that's been a big change.
Yeah, when we first came, we ran Adolph's offense 6, 8, and 10, okay? All three were designed to take a shot outside of the three-point line. You remember that?
Yeah, that's right.
And so the game definitely has changed. Guys who don't do what we do and stay 4 years, it's kind of a catch-22. What you gain and in that friendship and kind of working together for all those years. I'm sorry that the guys who leave earlier didn't get to experience that. By the same token, one bad step and a knee goes was a lot of money. You ask how I feel about the NIL. I think it's certainly going to change the game as the way we were used to. I hope it doesn't run it.
Yeah, a lot of people say it's impossible to compare eras, but I think you could take that 75 team, drop it into today's game, and they do quite well, maybe even better than because of that three-point line. How do you think you guys would fare that team playing nowadays?
I think we could compete. Yeah, I definitely think. I think we could play a little bit better defense than today's team. But I think we could shoot three, play defense, and rebound. Yeah, I think we could compete. Yeah.
Our team averaged 92 points. No shot clock, no three-point line. And the only games we really came close to blowing or losing is if anybody on our team had a 15-foot open jump shot, we took it. We didn't think about it. And, with time, how much time was left, and when we had a three-point lead with 2 minutes to go, it might make more sense to not take that 15-footer. But I think that freedom of that's basketball. If you have an open shot, you take it. I think our three-point shooting, could have been as good as what we're seeing. And when we first got here, we ran plays 6, 8, 10 that were designed for a shot outside the three-point line.
Ethan Grant, Scott's coverage. What was your reaction to Pope being named the head coach? A former player like yourself, just kind of Can you just talk about Pope being the head coach and kind of how that you can relate to him?
Look, I think Calipari was a great gentleman, tremendous recruiter, not my ideal, the greatest coach, but all in all, a really good guy. And I think Pope is the right time, and he's brought enthusiasm back into the program, and ultimately, it's good for the program that he is here. And so far, what I've seen, I absolutely like what I've seen.
Yeah, I think it was time for a change, and I'm glad they got Mark Pope. I think he's a great fit. He's got understands the modern game, offensively he does. Quick story, our former coach, Lynn Nance, used to coach at the University of Washington, and Mark Pope was out there playing for him before he transferred to Kentucky. Anyway, my son BJ, who ended up at U of L, Lynn Nance, he recruited BJ and went out there on a trip, and Mark Pope was his host when he was there. And then when Louisville and Kentucky played the first time, BJ and Mark, they went up to each other and say, hey, can you believe that we're playing against each other now? They started laughing. It was funny. It's a good story.
I refer to Coach Pope and people down the street, what do you think? And I said, well, maybe it wasn't our first choice, maybe it wasn't our second choice, but I think he was our best choice.
Yep.
So information on Adolph Rupp is just less and less nowadays, harder to kind of find for the younger crowd. If you could kind of tell people what playing for Adolph Rupp was like he as a personality, as a coach, just that, or maybe even a story of that time frame that's maybe not out, if you can just share some of that with us.
Go ahead.
I met Adolph when I was 16. I worked in the Rupp Issel Pratt basketball camp. Probably an NCAA violation at the time. But, I got to spend a lot of time with Mike Pratt and Dan Issel around him, and I think a lot of what has been portrayed for Coach Rupp is not correct. He, for years, he was deemed to be prejudiced. And if you knew Adolph and you knew how bad he wanted to win, you could be green. If you were the best basketball player, I think he would have recruited. At the time in the SEC in 60s and 70s, it was a little difficult for people of color to stay at the same hotel, and the reality of Deep South made the situation a little bit more difficult, I think. But I'm going to defend him. I would never call Coach Rupp a racist, and I knew him for 5-6 years. I have one funny story to tell you about Adolph. He hadn't been to a high school basketball game in years, and I played at Anderson County, and gym seated 2,500. And we managed to get almost 3,000 in there. The only person who couldn't come was the fire marshal. And so I used to say, well, what happens if Adolph shows up at a high school basketball game, which he did, and there wasn't even a place for him to stand. But it is Kentucky, and he showed up for a game, so the principal, and they stopped the game, roped off a little section for him, and then the game started. Everybody on my team, everybody on the other team knew why he was there. And for the next 4 or 5 minutes, there wasn't a basket scored, nor did I touch the ball. So Adolph, he kind of be a little bit disruptive in a basketball game, but he was a very interesting man, and I think oftentimes in history contributed in a way that I don't think is fair to him, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think he's one of the greatest coaches of all time. I mean, his record speaks for itself. And one of my greatest honors is, just like Jimmy Dan said, he came to one of my high school games in Jeffersonville. The place was sold out, and it was just an honor for him to be there. And he was wearing his brown suit. But, our freshman year, we really didn't get to play for Adolph because we couldn't play on the varsity, but we practiced against him every day. And I do remember this, one day in practice, he was sitting over in his chair, and he was nodding out. He was taking a little nap. So it was funny.
Guys, Leonard Hamilton says he's going to retire at the end of this season. Can you guys just talk about your relationship with Leonard when he was here?
Yeah, I mean, Leonard, he was only like 3 or 4 years older than us
We were,
when
yeah.
Joe B. hired him, and he was a great defensive coach, and he took care of our defense and made sure we played the defense the right way. And he was just a tremendous guy.
Great guy.
Great guy,
Yeah.
and we all enjoyed playing for him. And he's had a successful career, and now he's going to retire, age 76 or something? Yeah, so.
All right, gang. Think we're good. Appreciate everybody coming out. Thanks for your questions, and thanks. Congratulations to the 75 team.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, guys.